So Kant's attitudes towards premarital, extramarital, and homosexual sex are all quite conservative, quite traditional, in that he says none of them are permissible, none of them should be allowed. His reasons for premarital and extramarital sex are essentially along the same lines. Both premarital, extramarital sex, and indeed any sort of casual sex, there's a lack of commitment involved. So, whilst marriage is a way of kind of showing your duty and promise keeping towards another individual, premarital, extramarital, and casual sex are essentially just kind of non committal ways of treating others as a means to an end. So, if you're involved in any of these types of relationships, if you're having sex outside of marriage, outside of a committed relationship, then you are essentially just using the person as a way of getting what you want. Whether that's, just sexual gratification, or whether it's kind of perhaps even to upset or to cause a reaction from the person that you're in a committed relationship with, if it's an extramarital affair. Either way, you aren't treating the person that you're engaging in the sexual act with as though they are your end goal. They are the thing that you're working towards, the end in and of themselves. It's still misuse of a person, essentially, and not something that could be universalized, because nobody would want to be treated as though they are just a way of helping someone to masturbate or helping someone to create a reaction from their spouse. The argument could be put forward that in certain types of casual sexual relationships, like prostitution, there is an element of kind of a contract being partaken there. So both people are aware of the terms of their interaction, kind of what they're aiming for out of it. So there is arguably a more rational approach to that relationship on both parts. But the problem would be for Kant that it's not a relationship between two equals. There's an imbalance of power between the person buying and selling the act of sex. And so it couldn't be, it's not based on mutual respect. It's not between two equals, and so it can't be universalized. When it comes to homosexual sex, again, Kant's argument doesn't fill the second iteration of the categorical imperative, can't be universalized. We can't have a society whereby everyone engages in homosexual sex rather than heterosexual sex, because then we would end up with no society at all. We wouldn't be procreating anymore, or so would have been the case in the time that Kant was writing. But he was quite kind of firmly against it, so much so that he was kind of quoted as saying that homosexuality demeans man below the beasts. So it wasn't, from quotes like this, it doesn't really come across as though his issue is just, oh, we run out of population, it can't be universalized. It seems like he has more of a kind of, I guess, more of a moral objection to it than that. He sees it, the act itself, from quotes like this, one would assume as quite, as I say, demeaning. So it lowers human beings in his mind. It lowers human beings to engage in homosexual sex. It makes you less than that of an animal. So he certainly doesn't seem to think it's a rational sexual relationship which can be engaged in between two mutually consenting and respecting adults. So, whilst Kant himself was quite clearly and overtly opposed to homosexuality, there have been some kind of modern philosophers who have taken his principles and interpreted them rather in different ways to suggest that things like homosexuality could be permissible. So, the alternative understanding of his principles is that actually forcing someone who is homosexual into a heterosexual relationship is treating that individual as a means to an end rather than an end in and of themselves. So making someone get married in a heterosexual marriage when they're not actually kind of attracted to the person, they don't have heterosexual desires. It's just kind of the person that they're married to, then treating them an end, as a means to an end, as a way of getting married and fulfilling that part of their life and what they think they should be doing, and not respecting who the person is as an individual and what their genuine sexual desires is. So that's not to say that necessarily modern interpretation of Kant says, hey, everybody should be homosexual and there's no issues caused by that, blah, 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 blah. But it's more the case that forcing someone into a heterosexual relationship when they don't have heterosexual sexual desires doesn't allow that person autonomy or kind of the respect of being treated as a self-governing person that can make their own decisions about what they should and shouldn't do as a rational human being, and as something or someone that is deserving of being an end in and of themselves. And there are also modern neo-Kantians who've taken kind of a different approach to their attitudes towards sexual relationships, which are casual or premarital. So, arguably, if sexual acts are being kind of taken part in between two mutually respecting parties who are both consenting, and they engage in some sort of contract or agreement about what their relationship will be, then that is still two people being respected as an end in and of themselves. They're still being respected as though they are the thing that the other is aiming towards. So why can't we have mutually beneficial sexual interactions with someone else where we agree to certain terms and we kind of are happy with those, and we both feel respected and honoured as an individual, is the neo-Kantian approach. But arguably, if this sort of relationship is then going to involve kind of like cohabitation and a contractual relationship where you're agreeing to a long-term committed relationship, children, monogamy, etc., it's kind of it's difficult to see how really that sort of sexual contract would be vastly different to just a traditional marriage, really.